Khalid bin Al-Waleed, he was known as Sayfun min Suyufillah, a sword from the swords of Allah. A sword from the swords of Allah. He then, after that, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made him the leader over the Muslim armies. And he fought in the Battle of Tabuk against the Ghassani and the Roman army, again, the combined army. And Khalid, who was outnumbered in odds 20-1, defeated the Romans. The greatest superpower of his time, he defeated them in a flat-out battle. They sustained casualties, but the Romans were made to retreat. Khalid led the army in Hunayn, and they won in Hunayn. After the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, Abu Bakr became the Khalifa, and Khalid bin Al-Waleed was made the leader of the armies of the believers. And there were some people that refused to pay the zakat. Khalid was to go down there, ask them what their grievances were, and to try to negotiate a settlement. When Khalid arrived, with his 10,000 or so, he found troops of 40,000 waiting for him. They fought, Khalid defeated them, and the story was ended. But then Khalid was told, now go to Iraq. Bring this religion to Iraq. And Khalid and his army turned. They didn't even go back to Medina. They turned past Medina, went to Iraq, and they stopped at the Euphrates River, which was at high tide. This river was at a high base of its tide. And Khalid looked with the army and they said, what do we do now? And Khalid said, we've been told to go to Iraq. We have to listen to the Khalifa of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he said, Bismillah, and his horse galloped over the water. And the rest of the Muslims followed him into Iraq, and Islam came into Iraq. They found that the army of Iraq, which was a Persian outpost, was easily defeated, but it was massive. It was near 70,000. Khalid had 10,000, maybe a little bit more. Eventually, they came to a settlement. Khalid's fame spread, and the believers took on such a love for Khalid. While Khalid was in Iraq, negotiating with one of the Christian soldiers that was present, they put poison in soup and offered it to Khalid. And they put it in his soup. Khalid drank it and told them, you've poisoned this soup. And they said, yes, we've poisoned the soup. And he said, I advise you against doing that. And that was the end of it. Because the sword of Allah had a mission to complete. Khalid fought in some 50 large-scale campaigns. 50. And in every battle in which he led the troops, he never lost. The sword of Allah was always lifted. He never lost. He sustained over 100 sword and shield blows, but he never lost. Similar, his tactics, his ability to organize, to outwit, to outsmart the enemy. He had fewer supplies, fewer troops, fewer weapons. I'll mention a few things about Khalid that gives you an example of the iman that he had, because Khalid bin Al-Waleed, he had not memorized the whole Quran, being 20, 30 surahs. Some people would think, well, he must be a scholar, he's of high rank, I could never. No, Khalid was a layman from the Sharia standard. He was a layman. I'll mention 3 miraculous things about Khalid, besides what I mentioned before. One is that Khalid bin Al-Waleed, as the leader over the Muslim army, they had to go through the desert to fight one of their battles. And Khalid looked at how long it was going to take them to get through the desert. And some of the Sahaba expressed doubt because they said, This desert is extremely hot, and to fight the Roman forces and those on the other side, it's going to be too difficult. Let's go around it. But Khalid thought that's going to take too long. So Khalid had the camels drink all the water that they had, all of it. Then they rode directly through the desert. When they were just before the other side of the desert, Khalid had a number of camels killed for meat, but then also to cut open their humps to drink the water directly from the hump. It's military wisdom, bravery, tactics, thinking, strategy. And after they'd eaten and drank, they were fresh. And they sneak attacked the Roman army, who were thinking, how did they get all the way through the desert alive, with all of their troops accounted for, and they're on the other side of the canyon? What are they doing there? It was too late. Might I remind you that General Rommel used the same tactic to take North Africa? The Nazis used the same thing. Is that coincidence? I don't think it was when Khalid's listed as one of the greatest war generals in history. I would go so far as to say the greatest. If you look at the battle tactic that the Nazis used across North Africa and what the British used thereafter, exact same plan. Same thing. They even started from the same place. So Khalid left a mark on military history. Further to that, Khalid bin Al-Waleed, I mentioned that he'd been outnumbered. Sometimes he'd be outnumbered 20 to 1. The highest was 30 to 1. And Khalid would still win. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said that Allah was blessing Khalid because of his faith. Khalid had unshakable faith. Khalid was never the one that would be told, we can't do this, and he would accept it. What Khalid would be told is, or what Khalid would say or ask is, how many supplies do we have? How much equipment do we have? How many troops do we have? Once Khalid heard that, he said, we'll work with it. Khalid never spoke in negatives of what we can't do. We can't do this. Oh, that would never work. He never did that. Khalid bin Al-Waleed always spoke of possibilities, what could be, what should be. Here's what we can do. Here's what I think we can do. Now, interestingly enough, something changed. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu died, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he became the Khalifa. And one of the first things Umar did as the Khalifa was he removed Khalid as the head over the Muslim military. Removed him as the head. The Sahaba were absolutely dumbfounded. Why would you do that? We were victorious. We're focused. We're winning. Our iman is strong. Why would you do that? And Omar gave this reason. He said, what I am concerned about is you have great love for Khalid bin Al-Waleed. And I am concerned that you may forget that the victory comes from Allah and not from Khalid. And so for that reason, Omar removed him as the head of the military and put Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah in charge. One of the 10 promised the paradise. So he led the army with valor and distinction, but he used to always come to Khalid for battle strategies and plans, because he was not a tactician. Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah was a warrior, but he was not a tactician. He was not a general. Khalid led 50 successful campaigns and hundreds of smaller. You're looking at a genius. And so he had to speak to Khalid about different affairs. And when Omar came after Jerusalem had been taken, all of Sham, that's 5 countries, Palestine, Israel, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon. 5 countries in one move, in one day. Omar came and said, this is nothing but the handiwork of Khalid. Because he realized Abu Ubaidah did not have the wherewithal to get all of that done. And Khalid had split the army into 4.